In Chapter 10, we'll be learning about labor markets. Who's in the labor force? Well, the labor force consists of anybody who is 16 years old or older. They have to be able to work and they have to be willing to work. Now, when we talk about labor force, we're talking about the civilian labor force. These are people that are employed and unemployed workers who are not in the military. The military labor force is in direct competition with our civilian workers. It's much more competitive than it used to be to get into the military. That's because jobs are not as plentiful as they used to be. What factors affect the number of workers who enlist? Well, pay scales for one, training that is now available in the military, the benefits, the fact that you can get college tuition paid for, a sense of patriotism that we have in our country, and then just the job market and where we've been the last several years and how hard it is to get a job in the civilian labor force. As far as workers are concerned, economists group workers into three main categories. There is farming, which in the early 1800s was 90% of our workers, definitely not the case today. Manufacturing and construction, which has gone down in the last few years considerably, and then the service industry. And today the service sector is the very largest sector in our employment. There are different skill levels of workers. There are unskilled workers, a job that requires little to no special training. It's something that's quickly learned. We would consider something in the fast food industry or a cashier or a person that a receptionist. There are semi-skilled, which require more training. Some of those work on factory assembly lines, do things such as sorting mail and construction. These do require some training, but are still learned in a relatively short period of time. And then there are skilled workers, those that require extensive training, possibly an apprenticeship. Those that would fall into this category would be plumbers, electricians, and so forth. And then we have professionals, and professionals are those that require a college degree as well as years of additional specialized training. Careers that would fall into this category would be physicians, teachers, engineers, lawyers, accountants. Labor has supply and demand as well as products. And whatever value is placed on labor depends on the value that's attached to the product or the service that a worker helps to produce. There's also a term in this chapter called derived demand, and it's based on other factors. For instance, we have a derived demand that professional football players get paid a lot of money due to the popularity of the sport. And we also know that the supply of professional athletes is not plentiful. The definition for wages is the price that's paid for labor. As demand rises, so will wages. What are some factors that affect the supply of labor? Well, population is one. The more people you have that can and are willing to do a job, then the lower the wages are going to be. Wages are a factor, but they differ from a normal supply curve, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. We also need to know what the substitution effect is. The substitution effect is where you substitute your time for more money. So if you were able to make a higher wage at your job, you might be willing to work more hours. The substitution effect predicts that workers will work more when their wages go up. So here's a supply or a wages and labor graph that shows that as free time becomes more valuable than additional income. The income effect is in competition with the substitution effect. That's what the previous graph was showing. So an increase in your income will have the same effect as a decrease in the price of goods. So eventually what happens is that your demand for free time will increase. So for a while, it's great, making a lot of money, buying a lot of things, but eventually it gets to the point where free time becomes more valuable, and people decide that they don't want to work as much, even if it means they're going to earn more money. Again, acts against the substitution effect. Eventually, income effect may outweigh the substitution effect, and the supply of labor may decline, even though there would be a rise in wages. Another factor that affects the supply of labor is the lack of elasticity. For example, in order to be a teacher, you must have a college degree, you must be licensed in the state that you're trying to get a job. So if tomorrow, let's say that teachers' salaries were tripled, would there be a significant rise in applicants? Well, no, because only those that are licensed and qualified to teach would be able to apply. However, if fast food wages tripled and went to, let's say, $20 an hour, what would be the result of that? Well, there would be many, many people that would go and be willing to work at fast food places that may not have wanted to do that, but because of the wages being raised so high, they would be willing to do that job. Location is also a factor in the supply of labor, because there are sometimes people are just not willing to relocate, even if it means that they would make more money. The last part of Chapter 10 is supply, demand, and wages. And one definition that you'll need to know is wage rate, the standard of pay for a particular job. And also in supply and demand and wages, we have an equilibrium wage rate, which is just the rate at which the market has not a surplus nor a shortage of workers, and so the supply and demand are balanced, just as it is in product and services. Now here's something to think about. Why do professional athletes make more money than teachers or doctors? They are not all college graduates. They certainly don't. Most of them have PhD degrees. Most of them do have a bachelor's degree, but not all. So the reason is, when you're looking at professional athletes, you've got this high demand, but you've got a low supply, which results in a higher annual wage. Now, in comparison to the chart on the left, we've got ditch diggers, which would be, many people would be able to do this job. So you've got a low demand for this job, but you've got lots of workers that would be qualified. So a low in demand and high in supply results in lower wages for those types of workers, such as in the fast food industry. In labor, we have to talk about unions and what that means to workers and why we even have unions. So one of the reasons that we have unions is that they negotiate contracts for workers. A union is an organized group of workers with purpose to improve wages and to also improve working conditions for their workers. Union members will work with the employer. They will negotiate a contract, and they'll come up to a place where both can live. Here at Yorktown, we have a contract, we have a union, and there are people that represent teachers and workers, and so that we can get the best wages possible that the school corporation is willing to pay. So you come out from negotiations with a labor contract, and it's basically just a document that spells out what are your wages, what's your length of a work day, what are your working conditions, and what kind of benefits are you going to get over for a given period of time. And most labor contracts are from 1 to 2 years. Where this takes place is in collective bargaining, where employees and those employers sit down and negotiate and find a place where they all can live with a contract. Two terms you need to know, and there are a difference between these. There is a strike, the refusal to work by employees. So this is where employees would walk off the job. And there's also a lockout, which has happened in professional sports recently, where the employer refuses to let the employees come into the workplace until they come to an agreement at the bargaining table. Here's some statistics about unions and why we would even have them. There are 16 million union members in the United States today, and that's 13% of the workforce. That has gone down over the last few years, a lot of that due to the UAW We don't have as much manufacturing going on in this country as we did 10 years ago. 10 million of those workers are represented by one union, which is the AFL-CIO. Why would a business pay more for an employee who has a college degree? One reason would be just because many business people view a college degree as someone who persevered, someone who worked hard, and were willing to complete a long-term goal. We still do have discrimination that takes place in the workplace. This is against the law. If it can be proven, it can be penalized, but discrimination would be some type of bias based on race, religion, national origin, or possibly gender. Here's a graph that I really like to show. It's from 2012 that shows the difference in wages according to the type of degree that you have. And, it's not across the line, and there are good jobs that can be had without a college degree. I don't think there are good jobs that you can get without some type of training. But in general, the higher the degree, the more money that you're going to make. So it does pay to get an education after high school. And we'll be talking more about this in class.